we don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
And welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Bob Schieffer. Embattled New York Congressman Charlie Rangel told reporters Thursday he's now looking forward. He says he's looking forward to fighting ethics charges against him. CBS News investigative correspondent Sharyl Attkisson has been following this story. She's going to give us the very latest. Also, our national security analyst Juan Zarate is here with this week's flashpoints on foreign policy. And actor Sam Waterston was in Washington this week promoting fair elections. Our cameras caught up with him on that. But first, wrangling with the Rangel saga, and Sharyl Attkisson knows all about it, which I don't, Sharyl. So tell me, what is this all about?
Well, first, I don't think anybody thinks that Congressman Rangel really is looking forward to fighting these charges. After 2 years of an ever-widening House ethics investigation that I don't think he ever thought would get this far, he in fact initiated the investigation after some initial allegations, and it got bigger and bigger as more things came forth. The House Ethics Committee has now indicated they would like to charge him with some things. We won't know until next week on Thursday publicly exactly what they found about him, but we do know just from reports that are leaking out some of the issues they were looking at and what they're likely to do. They've questioned his use of official stationery to raise money for something that will be called the Charles B. Rangel Center for Public Service at City College in New York. We covered that story a couple of years ago because he also earmarked funds to this entity in his name, to that college, and it looked a little fishy or suspicious at the time. His use of 4 rent-subsidized apartments in New York, his failure to report income as required. There's a whole host of things they've been looking at, and now they've indicated they will charge.
Well, I tell you one thing, while he says he's looking forward to all this, he does not seem to be enjoying the news coverage he's getting. Listen to this exchange he had just yesterday with MSNBC's Luke Russert.
But you're not worried about losing your job?
What are you talking about? You're just trying to make copy? What job? The one I got?
Yeah. I mean, these are particularly serious
How
violations.
do you think I got my job? I was elected, right? How do you think I lose it?
Well, there's 2 ways. You can lose it by if your colleagues voted you out of here because of ethics violations, or if your constituents did not
What
find
station
you
are you from?
NBC. MSNBC.
While you're young, I guess you do need to make a name for yourself, but basically, you know it's a dumb question, and I'm not going to respond.
How?
Have you heard the
What's it got to do with it?
How's it a dumb question? If these
The allegations have been made by some people.
You
Yes.
not filed tax. You not filed taxes on properties in the Dominican Republic allegedly.
It doesn't
if that comes to be
sound
true,
like,
is that not
it doesn't
a
really
problem?
sound like NBC asking these dumb questions, but it just shows what has really happened to a channel that did have some respect.
So is it your understanding?
So,
Look, those are legitimate questions, and this has been sort of his approach along the way. If you've heard him at news conferences or addressing this the past couple of years, he's very touchy, normally very likable. I mean, people like Charles Rangel, and they enjoy bantering with him, but his approach has been sort of when you ask a question, he'll say, where are you from? He did this to the Washington Post after they did a big article. He calls the questions dumb. He says he's not going to dignify them with answers. That's been kind of how he's handled this.
well, let me ask you, I mean, they're talking about the Ethics Committee putting him on trial. I mean, what exactly is that about?
Well, we're trying to get to the bottom of this because if you've worked on Capitol Hill as long as you did, you know that it's very rare that they do anything. I mean, the House Ethics Committee, some people think, tends to almost protect the members really rather than make findings against them. So this is a big deal that they've come out and said anything. And I asked around yesterday, I haven't really investigated this fully, but nobody's heard of such a thing before where they've come out with this initial piece of paper that says there will be a hearing or some sort of conference next week to be followed by some sort of trial. I don't know if there's a precedent.
There was, I remember Jim Trafficant, who was later expelled from the Congress, and I think he later went to prison. There was some sort of process that's in the back of my mind like that that involved him. But would this be, I guess the bottom line here, this would be the first step for the Congress to expel
It sounds like
Rangel.
it. Yes, they have different choices. They could make a strong report that simply censures him. They could expel him. We talked about this. I mean, short of expulsion, he can get reelected. He's very popular still in his home district, and I'm not sure if there's much that could be said or done that would cause him to lose his seat via the voters route.
Yeah, because he could be expelled and run again and be elected, and then the Congress, if they did not want to seat him, and people don't always remember this. The Congress decides who will be seated in the House and Senate. They can just refuse to seat someone. So if he were reelected and then they came back and decided to expel him, they could do that.
I'm sure that the Democrats do not want to deal with that kind of embarrassment, and they'll be talking to him behind the scenes to come up with some kind of accommodation that avoids a really nasty public fight.
I would certainly agree with you on that, Cheryl. Thank you very much. Good job on this story. I want to move on now to this week's Flashpoints with our national security analyst, Juan Zarate. One is on this side of the table. Let's get right to it with this week's Senate hearings for Director of National Intelligence nominee James Clapper. That was the biggest news on foreign policy, wasn't it?
No, I think that's right. And what was interesting about it, Bob, was that it came at a time when the Washington Post came out with a series of articles laying out what they claimed to be the fourth branch of government, the world of top secret intelligence and defense industry that has really grown exponentially after 9/11, a world of contractors, budget increases, et cetera. In some ways, it's very interesting because Jim Clapper, in my opinion, was the perfect witness to address the very issues raised in this set of articles, in part because he has sat over the defense intelligence infrastructure for a number of years now. The Defense Department has almost 80% of the intelligence budget, about 2/3 of the assets in the intelligence community. And so when you raise questions about budget, use of contractors, and oversight, in some ways Jim Clapper is a good person to answer those questions.
What's next? What else should we be aware of?
Well, in terms of the DNI, he is going to be voted out of the Senate Intel Committee. There still, though, is a question as to whether or not, given his Defense Department background, he's going to be able to oversee the civilian components of the intelligence community. And these articles, again, raise some very serious questions. Are we over-relying on contractors? Is the sprawling infrastructure too large? Is there the right kind of oversight? And will Jim Clapper have the authority from the White House to get the job done? And there are a lot of skeptics out there as to whether or not that can happen. One quick point, Bob, on these articles. I think very good articles. They revealed quite a bit. But I think they were a little bit sloppy in some ways because it tended to jumble a lot of different things happening in the intelligence world. And I think it ignored some of the history of the commissions that have called on some of the redundancies that exist in the system now, competitive analysis, for example, and some of the very structures that are criticized in the articles were things that were called for by the 9/11 Commission and the WMD Commission in light of the Iraq failures.
What's the biggest thing happening overseas right now?
Well, we've got a number of things that are hot. Mexico right now is seeing a spike in violence. We've seen since 2006 over 25,000 Mexicans killed in the context of these drug wars. What's disturbing, Bob, is the tactics that are now being used. Last week we saw the first use of a car bomb by one of the drug cartels in Ciudad Juarez, which is right across the border from El Paso. It's the first time we've seen a car bomb used, and they used it as a lure to allow first responders to come to the scene of what appeared to be a distressed individual, and then they blew up the bomb. This starts to look a little bit like what some officials in the U.S. are calling a criminal insurgency. They've seen beheadings before, the use of grenades, high-tech weaponry, but this is the first time you've seen a car bomb. And I think Mexican officials are trying to downplay this a bit for obvious reasons, but it's a really disturbing evolution of the violence across the border.
And what else?
Well, we've got Secretary Clinton in Southeast Asia. She's there for the Association of Southeast Asian Nation Conference in Hanoi. The two big issues there, Bob, as you know, is North Korea. The U.S. announced some additional sanctions to try to pressure and isolate North Korea, as well as joint exercises with South Korea. And just today, the North Koreans have responded that there will be a physical response if those exercises are undertaken. And so the tension with North Korea is not abating. In fact, it could be increasing, and you're seeing that in the diplomacy. With Burma, interestingly, two things. The Obama administration is coming under quite a bit of scrutiny and criticism for not having a more proactive Burma policy. You have upcoming elections in Burma, which will, in the eyes of most observers, will not be legitimate, won't include the opposition and Aung San Suu Kyi, the dissident leader. In addition, you have new reports of Burmese nuclear ambitions. A report about a month ago from a dissident and a human rights group claiming that the Burmese were in search of a nuclear weapons program, and satellite imagery just released a couple days ago seems to confirm some of that reporting. And so that's now an issue on the agenda. What's going on with Burma? Are they seeking nuclear power, a nuclear weapons program, and who are they dealing with? So that's
nuclear power in Burma.
Yep, as ridiculous as it sounds.
All right, thank you very much, Juan. Around the world in about 3 minutes.
There we
with
go.
Juan Zarate. Finally today, Sam Waterston, the Law and Order legend on TV, was on Capitol Hill this week promoting something else, fair elections. Our Washington Unplugged's Elena Conley caught up with the actor, and here's a look at it.
And of course, money and politics will always be looking for each other, but it doesn't have to be around the elections themselves. And if they were fairer, then I think honest representatives and congresspeople and senators would be free of the stigma that attaches to what goes on now, and they'd also have a lot more time to do their work because they wouldn't have to be chasing money. We've had a bunch of catastrophes, the recession, which was brought on by something that was wrong in our financial system. We had this big catastrophe in the Gulf that was brought on by something that was wrong with the way we supply ourselves with energy. And in every one of these cases, big interests had their thumb on the scale when the rules were made and when the rules were implemented. And so we see the consequences of the current situation in the news every day. Isn't it? Because like every one of us, we read in the newspapers, every interested citizen, we read in the newspapers about how the two parties are fighting like cats and dogs. And I became concerned enough about that to become involved with Unity 08, which was a movement to elect an independent candidate in the 2008 election. And I was hopeful that after that election, that the winner had run appealing to bipartisanship and unity, and I was hopeful that that's what we would see, but I see the same partisanship, so I was indicted by my own opinions, and I have to do this.
All right, Sam Waterston. Well, thanks for watching Washington Unplugged, and join us every day right here on CBSNews.com. And I hope you'll watch Face the Nation on television Sunday. We'll be talking about race in America. I'm Bob Schieffer. Thanks for being here.